Dust choked the driveway as three sleek corporate SUVs boxed in a rusted tractor. Men in tailored suits stepped out, clutching foreclosure documents, expecting tears and a quick surrender. Instead, they found Harrison Caldwell on his porch, pouring sweet tea, tapping a single highlighted paragraph in the contract. In Finney County, Kansas, dirt is more than just earth. It is a ledger of generations, written in sweat, diesel, and debt. Harrison Caldwell knew the soil of his 1,500-acre farm better than he knew the lines on his own palms. He was a quiet man, broad-shouldered and weathered, with a mind that worked like a well-oiled combine harvester, methodical, relentless, and sharp. While other farmers spent their winters watching television or frequenting the local diner, Harrison spent his reading. He read soil analysis reports, commodities forecasts, and, most importantly, the law. It was the brutal drought of 2022 that brought the vultures circling. For 2 years, the skies over western Kansas had remained stubbornly blue, devoid of the heavy gray clouds that promised salvation. The corn stalks withered into brittle, yellow husks before they could even tassel. Families who had farmed the land for a century were suddenly drowning in operating loans they couldn't repay. Sensing blood in the water, the regional banks sold their agricultural portfolios to a massive Wall Street conglomerate called Prairie Horizon Financial. Prairie Horizon didn't care about farming. They cared about land acquisition. Their strategy was simple: offer distressed farmers a lifeline to consolidate their debt, lock them into predatory terms, and seize the prime real estate when they inevitably defaulted. The ultimate goal was to flip the foreclosed land to Apex Agri Holdings, a massive corporate farming syndicate. The man tasked with executing this hostile takeover was Richard Gable. Gable drove a pristine Range Rover and wore Patagonia fleece vests to look like he belonged in the country, but his hands were soft, and his smile never reached his eyes. In late November, Gable began visiting the struggling farms of Finney County, pitching the Drought Resilience Restructuring Plan. When Gable's Range Rover pulled into Harrison's driveway, Harrison was underneath a 1998 John Deere tractor covered in grease. "Harrison, good to see you," Gable said, stepping carefully to avoid a puddle of oil. "I'm here to help. We know the drought has been tough. Prairie Horizon wants to partner with you. We're offering a debt consolidation package. Lower interest rates, extended terms, and an immediate cash injection to get you through the winter." Harrison slid out from under the tractor, wiped his hands on a rag, and stared at the thick 300-page binder Gable was holding out. "Nothing is free, Richard," Harrison said, his voice a low rumble. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Gable lied smoothly. "Just standard restructuring. It gives the bank a bit more collateral security, but it keeps you on your tractor. Your neighbor, Tommy Henderson, signed his this morning. He's already getting his relief check." Harrison looked down the road toward Tommy's property. Tommy was a good man, but he was desperate, with 3 kids and a mountain of medical debt. Desperate men rarely read the fine print. "Leave it," Harrison said, nodding to the binder. "I'll read it over." "Take your time," Gable smiled, though a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Just remember, the relief funds are first come, first served." For the next 3 weeks, Harrison didn't touch a wrench. He sat at his kitchen table, under the pale yellow light of a hanging lamp, armed with a thermos of black coffee, a magnifying glass, and a stack of yellow legal pads. His wife, Martha, a pragmatic woman with iron gray hair and a sharp intellect of her own, watched him carefully. "They're trying to steal it, aren't they?" Martha asked one evening, setting a plate of roast chicken in front of him. "They're trying," Harrison murmured, adjusting his reading glasses. "The contract is a maze. It's designed to confuse. They cross-collateralize everything. If we miss one payment, they don't just take the land. They take the equipment, the house, the vehicles, and any future yields. It's a complete asset strip." "So we don't sign," Martha said firmly. "If we don't sign, they call in our existing notes by the end of the year, and we go bankrupt anyway," Harrison replied. He leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. The lawyers who drafted this in New York are smart, but they're arrogant. They used a boilerplate corporate template and assumed OS dumb farmers would just look at the signature line. Suddenly, Harrison stopped. He leaned forward, pushing his glasses up his nose, his finger tracing a dense block of text on page 214, section 14, subsection C, severability of subsurface and hydrological assets. Oh, a slow, dangerous smile spread across Harrison's face. It was the first time he had smiled in 6 months. "What is it?" Martha asked, stepping closer. "New York lawyers," Harrison whispered. "They drafted a contract based on Eastern Seaboard property laws. They didn't research the local statutes of Finney County, Kansas. In New York, water rights and land access are generally tied directly to the deed of the land. But Kansas is governed by the rule of prior appropriation, first in time, first in right. Furthermore, due to a bizarre legal precedent set in Finney County in 1898, involving a railroad dispute, subsurface water rights and surface easements could be legally severed from the primary agricultural deed, provided it was done before a lien was finalized. The bank was putting a line on the dirt, but they forgot to put a lien on the water. And in western Kansas, dirt without water was just a desert. "Martha," Harrison said, his eyes gleaming, "I need you to go to the bank in town tomorrow and open a new LLC in your maiden name. Then we are going to sign Mr. Gable's contract. We're going to step right into their trap." The trap was set, but Harrison Caldwell knew that springing it required absolute precision and total silence. The morning after Harrison finished decoding the contract, he drove his beat-up Ford pickup into town. He didn't go to Prairie Horizon Financial. Instead, he parked behind the Finney County Courthouse, a grand old limestone building that smelled of floor wax and old paper. He walked into the county clerk's office, where Brenda Higgins, a woman who had known Harrison since they were in high school, was sorting through tax assessments. "Morning, Harrison," Brenda smiled. "What brings you in? Don't tell me you're finally running for county commissioner." "Not today, Brenda," Harrison said, sliding a thick stack of manila folders across the counter. "I need to file some severance deeds. I'm separating the water rights of the Caldwell farm from the main property deed. I'm transferring all hydrological access, the Ogallala Aquifer wells, and the irrigation pivots to a new entity, M. Caldwell Hydrological LLC. Brenda frowned, adjusting her glasses as she looked over the paperwork. "Separating the water from the land? Harrison, if you ever try to sell the farm, nobody will buy it without the water rights." "That's exactly the point," Harrison said quietly. He didn't stop there. Over the next hour, Harrison filed a second set of paperwork. He legally subdivided a 10-foot wide strip of land that ran entirely around the perimeter of his 1,500 acres, including the only access road wide enough for heavy agricultural equipment. He placed this perimeter strip into an irrevocable conservation trust managed by Martha. By the time he left the courthouse, Harrison Caldwell's farm was an island. The land itself still belonged to him, but the water beneath it and the roads leading to it belonged to entities completely untouchable by Prairie Horizon Financial. 2 days later, Richard Gable sat in Harrison's kitchen, watching eagerly as Harrison signed the 300-page debt consolidation agreement. "You made the right choice, Harrison," Gable said smoothly, slipping the signed document into his Italian leather briefcase. "With this capital injection, you'll be planning by April. We are thrilled to be your partners." "I'm sure you are, Richard," Harrison said, his face an unreadable mask. Over the next 6 months, the reality of the bank's scheme played out exactly as Harrison had predicted. The drought persisted, a relentless, dry wind that turned the county into a dust bowl. The relief money the bank had provided was eaten up instantly by inflated fertilizer costs and diesel prices. In October, the axe fell on Tommy Henderson. Tommy had missed 2 payments. Prairie Horizon didn't offer a grace period. They didn't offer mediation. They executed the brutal clauses in the contract. In a matter of weeks, the bank foreclosed on Tommy's farm, seized his tractors, and froze his personal checking accounts. Harrison stood by his fence line one gray Tuesday morning and watched the county sheriff oversee the eviction of the Henderson family. Tommy, looking aged and hollowed out, packed his wife and kids into a rusty sedan. As Tommy drove past, he stopped the car, rolling down the window. "They took it all, Harrison," Tommy said, his voice cracking. "Every single dime. The rep from Apex Agri Holdings is already out there measuring the fields. Gable set us up." "I know, Tommy," Harrison said softly. "Dee, where will you go?" "My brother's place in Omaha. I'm done with farming. Just watch your back, Harrison. Gable was asking about your yields yesterday. You're next on their list." Harrison watched the taillights of Tommy's car disappear down the dusty road. A cold, hard fury settled in his chest. It was time. When the harvest of 2023 came in, it was dismal. But Harrison didn't even try to sell his meager crop of drought-resistant sorghum to make his loan payment. Instead, he liquidated it for cash, put the money in Martha's LLC, and intentionally missed his November mortgage payment. 3 days later, the first automated warning letter arrived. Harrison ignored it. In December, he missed his second payment. The phone calls started. Richard Gable's voice on the answering machine was no longer friendly. It was clipped, professional, and dripping with corporate menace. "Mr. Caldwell, this is Richard Gable. You are in violation of your restructuring agreement. We need to rectify this immediately, or Prairie Horizon will be forced to initiate asset recovery protocols." Martha stood by the kitchen counter, listening to the machine click off. "Are you sure about this, Harrison? If you're wrong about the law." "I'm not wrong," Harrison said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Let them come." By January, the bank initiated formal foreclosure proceedings. Gable, smelling the blood of his biggest prize yet, 1,500 acres of prime, flat Kansas topsoil perfectly suited for Apex Agri Holdings' massive autonomous tractors, fast-tracked the paperwork. He didn't even bother calling Harrison anymore. He just sent the lawyers. In late February, the final notice of default was delivered via certified mail. The bank formally seized the deed to the Caldwell farm. The transfer was registered at the county courthouse. Prairie Horizon Financial was now the proud owner of the land. The next morning, Gable decided to do the victory lap himself. He wanted to look Harrison in the eye and watch the stubborn, prideful farmer break. He wanted to supervise the eviction personally, accompanied by the corporate buyers from Apex Agri Holdings, who were eager to tour their new acquisition. As the convoy of 3 black SUVs sped down the county highway, Gable checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, straightening his tie. He was about to earn a massive commission. But when the SUVs turned off the highway and approached the entrance to the Caldwell farm, Gable's driver suddenly slammed on the brakes. "What are you doing?" Gable snapped from the back seat. "Sir," the driver said, pointing through the windshield, "the road is blocked." Gable leaned forward. A massive, brand-new steel gate stretched across the entrance to the driveway. Flanking the gate were thick concrete barricades, and bolted to the center of the gate was a pristine, white metal sign with bold, red lettering, "Private property. Conservation Trust easement. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted." Gable scoffed, opening his door and stepping out into the biting wind. The executives from Apex Agri Holdings stepped out of their vehicles behind him, looking confused. "It's just the old man throwing a tantrum," Gable muttered to the executives. "I'll handle this." Gable marched up to the gate, intending to climb over it, but as he approached, he saw Harrison Caldwell sitting comfortably on his front porch, 50 yards away, entirely unbothered. Harrison wasn't packing boxes, he wasn't crying. He was pouring a glass of sweet tea, holding a single piece of paper and waiting. Richard Gable gripped the cold steel of the barricade, rattling it furiously. The heavy gate didn't so much as shudder. Behind him, the wind whipped across the barren Kansas plains, carrying the biting chill of late winter. "Open this gate, Caldwell," Gable shouted, his voice cracking against the wind. "We have the deed. Prairie Horizon Financial owns this property, and you are currently trespassing." Harrison took a slow, deliberate sip of his sweet tea. He set the glass down on the porch railing, picked up his manila folder, and began the long walk down the gravel driveway. He didn't rush. He walked with the heavy, measured steps of a man who had already won. Waiting behind Gable were three men in expensive trench coats. The lead executive, Greg Chisholm, the vice president of acquisitions for Apex Agri Holdings, looked at his Rolex and scowled. Chisholm had flown in from Chicago specifically to finalize the integration of the Caldwell acreage into Apex's corporate portfolio. He did not have time for delays. "Richard, what is going on here?" Chisholm demanded, stepping up to the gate. "You told me this asset was cleared for immediate possession." "It is," Gable stammered, pulling a stack of court orders from his briefcase. "The sheriff executed the foreclosure on Tuesday. The farmer is just being difficult. I'll have him arrested." Harrison finally reached the gate. He stood on his side of the steel bars, towering over Gable. He didn't look angry. He looked entirely at peace. "Good morning, Richard," Harrison said smoothly. He nodded to the executives. "Gentlemen, welcome to Finney County." "Save the pleasantries, Caldwell," Gable spat. "Unlock this gate and clear out, or I'm calling the county sheriff to drag you out in handcuffs." "You can call Sheriff Miller if you like," Harrison replied, leaning against the gate. "Yeah, he and I play poker on Thursday nights, but he won't arrest me, Richard, because I'm not standing on your property." Gable blinked. "What are you talking about? The bank seized the 1,500 acres. "You seized the farm, yes," Harrison said, sliding a certified document through the bars of the gate. "But you didn't seize the perimeter. Take a look." Gable snatched the paper. It was a stamped, certified topographical map from the county surveyor's office, overlaid with legal text. Chisholm leaned over Gable's shoulder to read it. "3 weeks before I signed your predatory restructuring contract," Harrison explained, his voice projecting clearly over the wind, "I legally subdivided a 10-foot-wide strip of land that runs the entire circumference of this farm. I placed that strip into the M. Caldwell Conservation Trust, which is wholly owned by my wife. The bank's foreclosure only applies to the primary agricultural deed. So congratulations, Richard. You own 1,500 acres of prime Kansas topsoil, but it is completely landlocked by my wife's private property." Gable's face lost its color, and he stared at the map, tracing the red line that formed a perfect, unbroken square around the farm. "This is illegal," Gable sputtered. "You can't intentionally landlock an asset. Actually, under Kansas property law, an easement by necessity requires prior negotiation if the subdivision occurred before the lien was established," Harrison countered, quoting the exact statute he had memorized over countless midnight coffees. "You didn't do a thorough title search before you approved the loan, Richard. You just assumed the boilerplate New York contract would cover it. I have no legal obligation to grant you an easement. You cannot drive a vehicle, walk a man, or move a single piece of equipment onto that land without trespassing on my trust." Greg Chisholm's expression darkened. He looked at Gable, his eyes narrowing into slits. "Richard, is he telling the truth? We can't access the land." "We'll sue him." Gable panicked, turning to Chisholm. "We'll take him to court and force an easement. It might take a few months, but—" "A few months?" Chisholm snapped. "Planning season is in 6 weeks. We have 3 $500,000 autonomous combines scheduled to deploy here. We can't airlift them over his perimeter." "Even if you could," Harrison interrupted, his voice cutting through their argument like a scythe, "you'd have a hard time growing anything, because you don't have any water." Gable froze. "What?" Harrison slid a second document through the gate. This one bore the seal of the Kansas Department of Agriculture Division of Water Resources. Page 214, Section 14, subsection C of your own contract. Harrison said softly, "Severability of subsurface and hydrological assets. Your lawyers left a loophole, so the day before I signed your loan, I completely severed the water rights from the main deed. The Ogallala aquifer wells, the irrigation pivots, the pumping stations, they all belong to a separate LLC. Harrison pointed a calloused finger directly at Gable's chest. You own the dirt, Richard. Just the dirt. I own the water beneath it. And in western Kansas, dirt without water is just a sandbox. I hope Apex Agri Holdings likes growing cactus. Silence descended over the driveway, broken only by the howling wind. Chisholm snatched the water rights severance deed from Gable's trembling hands. He read it twice, his face flushing a deep, furious red. He understood exactly what he was looking at. In the corporate farming world, land without water rights was a toxic liability. It was fundamentally worthless. You idiot, Chisholm hissed at Gable, his voice venomous. You arrogant, incompetent idiot. You didn't secure the hydrological assets? You bought us a desert. Greg, please, we can litigate this, Gable pleaded, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. Litigate what? The contract your legal department drafted. Chisholm shoved the papers back into Gable's chest. Apex is pulling out of the deal. We are not buying this liability. You can explain to your board of directors why Prairie Horizon is now holding millions of dollars in useless, landlocked dirt that you have to pay county taxes on. Chisholm turned on his heel, signaled to his executives, and marched back to his SUV. Gable was left standing alone at the gate, clutching his ruined paperwork. He looked at Harrison. The smug, polished corporate shark was gone, replaced by a terrified man, realizing his career had just evaporated. You set me up, Gable whispered. No, Richard, Harrison said, turning his back and walking toward his porch. I just read the fine print. The fallout was swift and merciless. Back in New York, the executive board of Prairie Horizons Financial erupted in panic. Their entire strategy in the Midwest relied on flipping foreclosed land to corporate buyers like Apex. But word of Harrison Caldwell's legal maneuver spread through the agricultural community like wildfire. Suddenly, Prairie Horizon was toxic. They threw their best corporate litigators at the problem. William Treadway, a senior partner at a high-powered Manhattan law firm, flew to Kansas City to review the case. After 3 days of poring over Finney County property statutes, the Kansas Water Appropriation Act, and a highly obscure 1898 railroad easement precedent that Harrison had brilliantly exploited, Treadway delivered the bad news to the bank's board via a secure conference call. The farmer's legal framework is ironclad, Treadway explained, rubbing his temples. Why, he separated the assets legally before our lien was perfected. If we take him to court, we will lose. Worse, if this goes to open trial, the precedent will become public record. Every distressed farmer in the Midwest will learn how to landlock their property and sever their water rights. Our entire agricultural portfolio will become worthless overnight. So what are our options? The CEO of Prairie Horizon demanded. We own a property appraised at $0 because it has no access and no water, Treadway sighed. But we are still legally responsible for the property taxes and the liability insurance. The farm is bleeding us dry. We have to offload it. 2 weeks later, Harrison Caldwell received a formal invitation to a mediation summit in Wichita. He didn't wear a suit. He wore his cleanest pair of denim jeans, boots, and a flannel shirt. He sat across a sprawling mahogany conference table from William Treadway and a severely diminished Richard Gable, who looked like he hadn't slept in a month. Mr. Caldwell, Treadway began, using a tone of forced respect. We acknowledge the unique legal complexities of your situation. Prairie Horizon Financial is prepared to offer you a settlement. We will sell you the surface deed back. We'll forgive the outstanding debt, provided you drop the conservation trust and the hydrological severance. Harrison leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. I'm interested in buying my dirt back, Mr. Treadway, but I'm not paying market value. The land is currently landlocked and dry. According to the county assessor, in its current state, it's virtually worthless. Treadway frowned. What is your offer? Harrison slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a cashier's check, drawn from Martha's LLC. The money they had saved by selling their sorghum harvest, combined with the initial capital injection loan the bank had given them in the first place. 10 cents on the dollar, Harrison said flatly. Gable slammed his hand on the table. That's robbery. You're trying to buy your farm back with the very money we loaned you. I'm executing a free market transaction on a distressed asset, Richard. Harrison echoed the exact words Gable had used months prior. Just business. Treadway silenced Gable with a sharp glare and looked at the check. Mr. Caldwell, 10% is a tough pill to swallow, but given the circumstances, the board might approve it just to close this file. We have a deal. We're not done, Harrison said. He slid a second folder across the table. Inside were the foreclosure documents for Tommy Henderson's farm. Tommy Henderson's property sits on the same aquifer as mine, Harrison said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, uncompromising register. You evicted him illegally based on a predatory clause. You are going to transfer the deed to Tommy's farm to my LLC. In exchange, I will sign a non-disclosure agreement stating I will not discuss my legal strategy with any other farmer, journalist, or lawyer in the state of Kansas. Treadway stared at Harrison. The lawyer realized he wasn't negotiating with a simple farmer. He was negotiating with a master tactician who held a loaded gun to the bank's entire Midwest operation. If Harrison went to the press, Prairie Horizon would lose hundreds of millions in projected land acquisitions. Give him the Henderson deed, Treadway ordered Gable. But sir, Apex already took possession. I said give it to him, Richard, Treadway barked. Apex backed out of the Caldwell deal. They're on shaky ground with Henderson's water rights too. We are terminating our Midwest expansion. Do it. Gable's hand shook as he signed the transfer authorization. It was the last document he would ever sign for Prairie Horizon. He was fired before his flight back to New York landed. Spring came late to Finney County, but when it arrived, it brought rain. The heavy gray clouds rolled in over the plains, breaking the 2-year drought and soaking the earth until it smelled rich and alive. Harrison Caldwell sat high in the cab of his John Deere tractor, the diesel engine purring beneath him. The steel gate at the end of his driveway stood wide open. As he turned the tractor at the edge of his property line, he looked out across the horizon. A mile down the road, he could see a plume of black smoke rising from another tractor. Tommy Henderson was back on his land, plowing his lower 40, his farm secured in a trust that no Wall Street bank could ever touch. Martha walked out to the edge of the field, holding a thermos of hot coffee. Harrison throttled down the engine and stepped out of the cab, the damp Kansas soil squishing perfectly beneath his boots. The soil looks good this year, Martha smiled, handing him the thermos. It belongs to us, Harrison said, looking out over the sprawling green shoots breaking through the dirt. Every drop of water, every inch of dirt, free and clear. The corporate vultures had come with their briefcases, their slick suits, and their predatory contracts, fully expecting to feast on the bones of a dying town. But they had made one fatal miscalculation. They assumed the people who worked the dirt were simple. They didn't realize that a man who spends his life reading the earth knows exactly how to spot a snake in the grass. Harrison Caldwell took a sip of his coffee, tipped his hat to his wife, and climbed back onto his tractor. There was planting to be done. If you loved seeing the underdog outsmart the system, hit that like button and share this story with someone who appreciates a brilliant twist. The corporate world thinks they can bully the working class with confusing contracts, but Harrison proved that knowledge is the ultimate weapon. What would you have done in his shoes? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible real-life stories of revenge, resilience, and triumph.